Cool. So wait, how is the setup look? Like, is it all 4 squares right now? Is it like a Brady Bunch grid?
Yeah. I've got you 3 on there. I'm the tiny thumbnail on me. So as long as I know that my head isn't floating off screen, I guess we're good, right?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I see you 3 as big images, and then I'm in the upper right-hand corner. So cool. So it's streaming live right now on YouTube.
We're good.
Right.
Damn, dude, we're live. Nice. Cool. I guess I mean, this is a kind of a first for all of us. But did you want to just launch right into it, or did you want to do some chilling first? How do you want to handle this?
Let's launch into it, and we can chill while we're doing it.
All right, that sounds good to me. Cool. Well, this is kind of a experiment we're doing here on the Ask Podcast. We're back after a long hiatus, partially caused by coronavirus, partially caused by our lack of motivation to get together. But we're here and we're back on the Ask Podcast. If this is your first time watching or listening to the Ask Podcast, Ask is not just a joke. It is a acronym for Animation Success Stories. And what Animation Success Stories podcast is all about is we talk to animation industry professionals. We hear their stories. We hear where they came from, how they got to where they are, the mountains they need to climb, the hills or the rivers they need to traverse, all that cool stuff. And hopefully along the way, all the inspiring up-and-coming animation industry professionals get some words of wisdom and words of advice from people that have been vetted in the industry for quite a while. That's at least our goal here. Today, in the Ass, is Chris Battle. Chris, thanks for joining us, man.
Happy to be here. What's up, guys?
Hey, man. Chris is an industry vet. He's worked at Cartoon Network on shows like Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, and a slew of other things that we're going to learn all about today when we talk to him. So, of course, I'm here with Brian. Brian's over there chilling.
Hey. Yep, I'm here.
Nick is here. I don't know if you guys can see Nick. Oh, cool. Nice. Oh. So, Nick, you're the guy in the upper right-hand corner. Is that for the stream?
You're an ant window.
Nice. Sabrina is not able to join us today, unfortunately, but she's here in spirit, and I'm sure she'll be at the next one. So, shout out to Sabrina. What up, Sabrina? Cool. So, I guess the way we usually start this podcast, Chris, is if you guys are all ready just to launch into it, we can just start chatting and hear about your stories. Does that sound good?
Sounds all right, yeah.
Dope. Well,
I see questions are coming in.
So, I guess the way we usually start this podcast, Chris, is I can put my headphones in to launch into it. We can just start chatting and hear about your stories. Does that sound good?
Sounds all right, yeah.
All right, let me put my headphones in and see if it helps.
Well, I popped both my headphones in, so.
Is that better? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Huh? No more reverb? All right, maybe that's it.
All right, I guess it was my fault. My bad. Awesome. So, Chris, thanks again for joining us, man.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Happy to be here in the ass.
Yeah, here.
The Corona ass.
We're going to dive deep into
that's a bad one.
Yeah. So, Chris, how did you get hooked up with Animation Success Stories? Were you and Brian buddies?
Yeah, we worked together for several seasons on Teen Titans Go, and we've been talking about this for a long time. We're like, we just got to get on it. How's next week? How's next month? And by the time we're able to do it, we're all in lockdown.
I promised Chris could come on the show since the 200th episode of Titans. Remember when we talked about it at the party?
Oh my God, that was so long ago.
I know.
But in a way, it's easier to do this now because we're like, I don't think I'm going anywhere or doing anything.
Yeah. We don't even need to leave our homes, which is interesting. And I'm sure the sound quality is probably better than it usually is.
Yeah.
Probably.
Which is maybe this will be more of a regular thing. So Chris, thanks for joining us. I guess the first question we usually ask for our guests is what is your first animation memory?
Probably one of the early ones I remember was seeing Snow White as a kid. And I remember getting the shit scared out of me when Snow White is in the forest. And I always remember those alligators that are actually like logs floating in the water.
Yeah.
And just like every kid with every Disney movie, just screaming, crying like crazy. And my mom had to hold me until, all that scariness ends and the cute animals come out. But that's probably one of those early ones.
Yes, Snow White is surprisingly terrifying. I watched it recently after I got Disney Plus, and there's some really like intense images in that movie. I can see why it sticks with you.
Yeah, I think every movie has a trauma-inducing scene, even all the way up till now, right? It's tradition.
The good ones do.
Yeah, for sure. They know how to play out tug on your heartstrings and like play with pathos and actually make you feel for people. If it's like Brian said, if it's a good one.
And the other interesting thing is Snow White being the first feature-length animation. But it was also, there were no rules or standards for what was like child appropriate or what wasn't. So it was just like, we're telling a story. And of course, the original fairy tale's way more graphic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know the original fairy tale. Oh, never mind. I'm thinking of Red Riding Hood. The guy cuts the wolf open or something. But what was graphic about Snow White? Do you remember? Probably the same idea. People get cut open.
Yeah, I think they actually kill the witch, the evil queen, like the dwarves do. They like chop her up.
I think there was like a heart ripping out scene in the original story of Snow White, something like that, where they wanted to, or maybe that was in the actual movie where they asked the woodsman to take her heart out and present it as a trophy, which is pretty.
Yeah, that's what she wanted.
So, what else did you watch growing up, Chris? Besides, I know that's your first memory, which is a pretty intense one.
Yeah.
But like, what else did you watch growing up? What were your first memories of like shows, cartoons you watched?
Well, back in the old days before cable and stuff like that, we just had regular old TV, which was mainly showing a lot of old stuff. So I got to watch a lot of classic Looney Tunes and like the original Hanna-Barbera stuff, like Flintstones and Yogi Bear and stuff like that. Before they got too much into the old carbon copy stuff. But a lot of those ones with really strong characters. So it was all about a lot of funny, wise ass talking animal characters, throwing pies and dynamite sticks in people's faces.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Did that influence your sensibilities at all?
Absolutely. Some people love the Disney stuff and like doing beautiful, emotional stuff, but I just like funny slapstick things. Cool. That's guided most of my career, is that I just go for comedy. And I was really happy that I actually got to work at Hanna-Barbera, getting ahead of myself, I guess, in the story, but I did get to work at Hanna-Barbera right before that closed down and got absorbed to Warner Brothers. And I've been at Warner Brothers several times. So it's kind of nice to be a part of those things that I watched as a kid.
That's fantastic. And Hanna-Barbera, I know you're a character designer, which I don't think we mentioned that yet, but you're a character designer, probably first and foremost. I'm sure you do many other things. But Hanna-Barbera, even though their kind of mentality was really quantity over quality oftentimes, even though some really wonderful gems came out of it, the character designs were usually pretty good. We're even on the shittiest iterations of Hanna-Barbera, like clones of clones. The character designs I always thought were pretty decent.
Yeah, and especially in those early years, there were really strong designs. And to make up for the limited animation, they had to have really great voices and really good writing. So it was really based on character for sure.
Yeah,
and I think strong visual characters like that really have an effect on you as a kid. You can really absorb it. But I mean, come on, Bugs Bunny, the coolest cartoon character ever, though. So all the Looney Tunes and that, it was a good time.
Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, it's interesting that like the thinking behind those early Hanna-Barbera cartoons was the way we think about how adult cartoons usually go now. It's very limited animation, usually good design, or at least clear design. Like every character, every show has a unique aesthetic to it. And then, of course, it's about the voice performances.
Yeah.
It's true. Like, for example, like Archer, limited animation, right? BoJack, limited animation, but strong design sense, strong art direction.
Family Guy, you say what you want about the design, but you're looking at Family Guy when you see it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm always reading about how all those original Hanna-Barbera shows were prime time for adults. People to come home from work and watch in the bars and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like Flintstones and Jetsons were like 8:00 p.m. kind of shows, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Bugs Bunny before. Just out of curiosity, do you have a favorite Bugs Bunny design? Like, do you like Chuck Jones, Bob what's his name? Bob McKinson.
Yeah, I think I like all the kind of the original Chuck Jones before he got too angular and with all the eyelashes and all that kind of stuff. I think those are my jam. Yeah.
Cool. Nice, man. So was Hanna-Barbera and like Warner Brothers, were those some of the first things you drew as a kid, or did you like iterate what you saw on TV, or did you imitate what you saw on TV, or did you just come up with your own stuff?
Like most kids, you just grow up drawing what you see, and it could be anything. There was definitely a lot of comic books that I would draw. I actually found a lot of my old artwork, and I was posting that recently on my Instagram, where I had drawings I did when I was like 5 years old of all the superheroes. And
nice.
it's a fun comparison to run with. And any movies that you would see, or Sesame Street or toys or whatever, you're just absorbing it and putting it all back out there.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
I have a lot of things where I could just look at stuff and you wouldn't even know what it is. And I'd say, I know that is this old animated movie from the 60s called Alakazam the Great. And then it was all like a retelling of the Monkey King thing.
What?
And I was able to Google it. And so, oh my God, it's, these drawings that I did were just bad little kid drawings and markers. I was like, that's that dude, that's that dude, that's that guy. It's.
Oh, damn.
When you drew these characters, did you do it from memory, or did you like have a VHS so you can kind of like replay it and pause it and draw it?
Well, the early stuff was before VHS, so there's things where it's either like afterwards, but there's definitely some drawings where I remember as a kid sitting either at the kitchen table or sprawled out on the living room floor with just a bunch of pencils and paper and just drawing them. So either way, yeah.
Nice. The benefit of doing this via computer is I can immediately Google something I don't know. So you just said Alakazam the Great. I was like, what the hell is that? So I just looked it up, and it looks pretty freaking cool. So you drew these characters, this little monkey guy?
Yeah, and it's just like total little kid scribbles, just really messy looking. But I was definitely able to identify all those guys. I should dig that up again and try to.
That's
scan
fantastic.
It.
How did you get your hands on Alakazam the Great as a kid?
It was just on TV,
on TV.
Just like on a Saturday afternoon. All the local TV channels would just be trying to fill up time, and a lot of time, if you were a kid and you saw a cartoon, and any time other than Saturday morning, you were just like, I'm there.
Nice.
And in prime time, the only times they would show a cartoon would be like Peanuts Christmas special or something like that. Yeah. So anytime you saw any of those things, you were there 100%.
This is pretty cool looking stuff. It's like it's an anime, right? It's a 1960s anime.
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, it looks Japanese. It looks imported.
Now we're all looking at. This is now going to become Alakazam the Great podcast.
Yeah, I think I've seen images of this, but I know I've never seen the movie before.
That's really cool. Nice.
Yeah.
So Chris, did you always, like, at what point did you know that you wanted to do this as a career, like work in art and animation as a career?
Well, I mean, I was one of those kids who always loved to draw, and my parents both encouraged it because my dad is a photographer, and my mom, she didn't get to really explore her artistic skills later in life. But like her brother was, he wasn't able to be an illustrator because in Chicago in like the 50s or something like that, you just went into advertising. So he did that, but he had always been praised as an artist, and she only tried it out after having kids. And so she was a really talented artist. So, she said, I wish somebody had encouraged me. My kid wants to draw. I'm going to encourage that. And,
nice.
And my dad was a photography instructor. He had actually done photography for a while. He actually went to Chouinard before it became Art Center. So they just knew, just encourage your kid, give them a lot of pencils and crayons and whatever, and buy them books, whatever they need to fuel what they like. So I was just always drawing as a kid, and that was my thing. All kids sometimes have a talent, and I was the drawing guy.
Nice.
And when I was a kid, when I realized that people did that for a living, at first I just thought, like, I want to do comic strips. I want to be Charles Schultz, or I want to be Jim Davis, or I want to draw Spider-Man comic books. And that, like when you're a little kid, you're like, I want to be a baseball player. I want to be an astronaut. I'm like, well, I want to be a cartoonist. But because I grew up in LA, my parents would take me anywhere if there was a cartoonist appearing somewhere or an animator, if they could get me a tour of a place. We just go see it. So when I was pretty young, I knew that there were people that did that, and that is an actual job.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you knew it pretty early.
Yeah, and you know, when you grow up in LA working in entertainment, it's not some weird far off dream that people discourage. You're like, oh, you want to be an actor? You want to do costumes or whatever? You say, yeah, that's a real job. And I probably know a couple people. You know, people are only like, you know, it's not the 6 degrees thing. It's more like 3 degrees. Somebody always knows someone who works in entertainment. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I was very lucky that I had parents who encouraged that. So.
Nice, man. Nice. Just out of curiosity, you said that you saw like cartoonists and people when they passed through town. Do you remember any as a kid that you like met or got to see?
Yeah, I did get to meet Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. I'm thinking that was probably like maybe early 80s or late 70s.
Two of the original
like that.
9 Old Men, yeah.
Yeah. Did that and there was something I don't know. My dad met someone where she was an animator at Disney, or she was a trainee or something. I got to tour Disney Studios like in 1982, I think. Yeah, I remember. Was it
that
like
would have been like Fox and the
Cauldron.
Hound there?
I think they'd finished that. I think they were working on Black Cauldron. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of my early memories.
Yeah. I got to meet like Jim Davis when I was like 9 years old and show him my hand drawn
of Garfield fame. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And one of the best ones I had was I would go to our local comic book store and I got to meet Sergio Aragonés when he was putting out the first Gru the Wanderer comic. Wow. And he just said, you should just keep drawing. And he drew cartoons of me drawing a cartoon of him, you know, whatever. Wow. I still have those drawings.
Holy cow.
And there's been
several times. Of great people.
Yeah, and several times in my life in the past couple of years, now that I'm a pro, I've been able to meet Sergio again. And he's still an amazing, wonderful guy. Mm-hmm. You know, I even was able to tell him, I pulled up this picture I had of me and him when at the comic store when I was 10 years old and said, oh, hey, you told me when I was 10 to keep drawing. And I've been doing animation for years now. Thanks for the encouragement. He said, oh, that's great. And I said, well, you've got some people waiting to see you here. I'm just going to get out of the way. Just wanted to shake your hand. Thank you. And I'll move on because, you know, you should talk with your other fans. And he said, hey, wait, come back here. Let's take the same picture, but take it now. You know, I'm like, yes, let's do that. You know,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Do you have them like framed side by side or something?
Well, not framed, but I mean, I did put them up on all my sites though, so that was fun to show. But
that's really cool.
I still do have his original drawings framed. Those are pretty good.
That's pretty awesome. Do you think that meeting all these people growing up had an impact on you on like definitely solidifying art as a career, or would you have done it regardless?
Hard to say, but I would definitely say that totally solidified it. I mean, already just knowing that it's people's jobs to invent everything you see. You know, when I was a kid, I was a Star Wars kid. My parents got me like all the Joe Johnston sketchbooks and the big Art of Star Wars things. So I knew that there's like armies of people that design these things. But when you do meet people and you get to talk with them, that makes it even more relatable and more real.
Yeah. It's just you're just at that point you just know that it's a tangible thing that you can reach towards, and it's a goal that's not it's not too out there. Oh, I think we just lost Brian. What happened to Brian? Brian. Yeah, let's see if we can get Brian back in before we continue. But that's so far that's pretty impressive that you got to you were encouraged by your parents and you got to meet all these fantastic people. That's really awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that point up, that living in LA, like you're surrounded by people that do these jobs. So it's not, it seems like it's a feasible thing and it's a tangible thing. Whereas living, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest, it might be a little more far out if you pitch that idea of I want to draw pictures for a living to your parents. They might think that doesn't exist. You know?
Yeah, you'll starve. You're an artist. But then when you tell people, it's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you like doing cars? There's people who design concept cars, or there's people who design vehicles for movies, or there's costumers, or there's people who design sets, or they build sets. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You know?
They really are. And I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to our podcast, I mean, we have a lot of listeners in LA, but they're also all over the country and all over the world to an extent. Yeah. So, I mean, I think them hearing that, they know that now it is actually a tangible job. It's something that they can actually aspire to, which is nice, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the internet just opened everything up, because before you'd have to either live here, or if one of those people happened to come to your town, or if you went to a convention, maybe you could meet them or something. But now everybody can talk directly to all their artists, you know, and watch a podcast like this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like when you were a kid, you actually got to go and meet these people. But now, like, if somebody's listening and they don't have the opportunity, they don't live in LA, right? They live in Australia. They can, you know, they have the internet at their disposal. They can contact these people in a tactful manner. Obviously, they don't bombard them. If they contact them in a tactful way and they express, you know, that their admiration and maybe even ask for some advice, you know, a lot of the, you know, the artists that they admire are grounded people that are really down to earth and willing to give advice, I'm sure, you know?
Yeah, because we were all those kids at one point too. And whenever we got to meet somebody, you know, we all remember who was like a weird jerk about everything, and we all remember who was really cool and actually took 10 seconds to encourage a kid and maybe even give you some real advice. So it's like, yeah, we all want to, you know, be one of those guys.
For sure,
you know,
yeah. Did you ever have that jerk in your life that was like, don't do art, stop, give up?
Fortunately, no, but I have heard stories from people. Yeah, no, luckily I was able to just meet people. I was young enough that they just straight up encouraged me. And as I got a little older, people like Sergio, and then we actually had a family friend who was a Disney animator, Toby Bluth. You might know his brother Don Bluth, but Toby was a well-known artist and animator in his own regards, and so he was kind of like my informal mentor during my teenage years.
Wow.
You know, and we would just visit him every couple of months, and I'd just bring a bunch of my drawings over, and he'd show me what he was painting. And I was fortunate that he did also encourage me, but then he would occasionally let's slip in some of the lessons about it's not all like, you know, all rainbows and fun and magic. There's, you know, there's people you're going to deal with who are not pleasant, and there's office politics, but not stomping on my dreams. So he hit the right balance like that.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Who are we talking about?
We're talking about Toby Bluth, Don Bluth's brother, who Chris was saying was a kind of a mentor of his.
You have to work with one of the Bluths.
Well, I didn't get to work with him, but he was a family friend, and he was like an informal mentor since I was like 12 or 13, and he was very pleased to see me actually making it into the business on my own.
Mm.
Were you inspired at all by his drawing style? Did he kind of like influence you in that way?
No, I think, you know, because when I met him, I was 12, and I was already getting into a lot of my own influences, because he was like 100% classical Disney. And I was never leaning that way so much. I was always more into cartoons. I thought for a while I would be like a comic strip artist. You know, I don't know if I'm ever going to animate. Maybe I'll invent my own cartoon, or I wanted to work for Mad Magazine, or maybe I could try to draw comic books. But I think I realized that's really hard to draw realistic things, and I wanted to just draw funny stuff. Nice. And especially as I got into the business, you know, as a young adult, I was like, I like wild, crazy things. You know, like when I got into the business, like Ren and Stimpy had just started, and I was like, that is the greatest thing ever. I want to do something crazy like that. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So he just knew I kind of had my own direction. He just encouraged me to go about it, you know? Well, again, I will say like Hanna-Barbera and Looney Tunes, super big inspirations. And, you know, it's, you know, because growing up, really coming of age in the 80s, you just have all this crazy shit that was going on. I mean, you would have like classic stuff, like all those old movies and the animation, but then Star Wars is a big one. And then you have like Muppets and all the Sesame Street animation, right?
Yeah.
And video games, 80s video games, Nintendo. Marvel Comics is a big one, you know.
Sure.
And then when anime came into the mix, kind of in the mid 80s, that was another big one. So yeah, it's hard to point to one thing, but it was all like this weird stuff, just all kind of smushed together.
For sure. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's kind of the sign of a really good artist, when you can kind of take the amalgamation of all these all these different styles and influences that are coming at you at all given time, whether it's on a conscious level where you're looking at it and you're internalizing it and kind of regurgitating it in a way that's your own, or just on a subconscious level where you're just kind of seeing these things in your peripheral vision and then kind of being influenced by them without even knowing, you know? But I think that if you're able to kind of take that and turn it into something that is expressive of your own stylistic choices and what's the right word there, but make it your own. That's kind of something that's pretty, to me, always been impressive when I look at an art style and I'm like, oh, that's that guy. Oh, that's that guy.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it wasn't until as I was just starting to get into the business and I was getting old enough to really be consciously directing my own artistic development in a direction that I wanted. That's like Ren and Stimpy was like a real perfect distillation of old school Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera, like that era. It was kind of really blending the two of them to like the perfect mix. So I was able to look at that and say, that's kind of the style that I want to go for, eventually. And then, after a couple of years in the business, that's when all the new Cartoon Network stuff started coming up. And I was able to get in there and work on Dexter's Laboratory. And then I'm working with all these guys, all my contemporaries who came out of CalArts, even though I didn't go to CalArts. And I was able to learn from that. So it all kind of worked out just right.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. I guess we're going to dive deep into that in a minute. But so before we get into like all the shows you worked on with, after you said that, I actually have a lot of really cool follow-up questions. But I'm wondering like what you mentioned where you went to college briefly, but or maybe you didn't. If you didn't, could you mention it?
I didn't go to college actually, because I graduated from high school and I had a high school that had an arts program, but I was lucky that I had a teacher who recognized that all of the cartoons that I was drawing was not like little doodles, and he really encouraged it. So I was doing like paintings of my cartoons and stuff like that, really trying to go illustration. But after I graduated, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I haven't invented the next Calvin and Hobbes. I don't have any ideas for that. I liked animation, but that was like late 80s. It wasn't like a big boom yet. And I'm like, I'm not going to be a Disney animator, and I'm not ready for this, that. I didn't know what to do. So I was just like taking just a couple community college courses in like graphic design and stuff like that, trying to figure how do I make this work. And then luckily it was such a boom in animation. It was weird. I just needed a regular old job just to have spending money. And turned out Hanna-Barbera was opening up these stores that were a lot like the Disney stores, but it was all themed with like Flintstones rocks and stuff like that, and jets and spaceships. So I said, well, here's the thing I could interview for, and I'll convince them I'm the guy to hire. And they hired me because cartoons, obviously. Yeah. And they had since it was run directly by the studios, they had us tour the studios because they wanted everybody to know about animation.
Wow, lucky.
Yeah, and then all the artists would come on down because it was in West LA. They would come on down because they're like, this is the only Hanna-Barbera store out here. Let's go bring our families there. And and the store management always said, give them your best service because they're the ones that they create what we do that makes our job possible. So I got to know the head of design at the time, Scott Geralds, and my manager. He said, oh yeah, this guy does cartoons too. You should see his work. And I'm just telling him like, shut up, dude. I can't show these guys my dumb doodles. And he said, no, come on, let's see them. And so because my manager dared me to show him, I showed him my doodles. And he's like, these are pretty cool. You should come by and show us more of your finished work, and we could really give you more of a deeper dive into the studio. Wow. And after I showed him more of my real work, he was like, these are pretty good. Keep in touch with me, and we'll see. Maybe something can happen. And I think the stores wound up closing when Turner bought Hanna-Barbera. Yeah. Then I got, about a year later, I got a call from Scott. He was at the newly formed MGM Animation doing a new version of the Pink Panther. And this was in 1993. Okay. And they didn't have a huge budget, I'm sure. So they needed like young artists who were probably not that expensive, but who were eager to learn. That was my first job in animation.
Wow. That got me in there. That is quite the story. So right from high school, the job at the short-lived Hanna-Barbera store basically got you, thrust you into the animation world.
Yeah, and it was because that boom was happening. That was, like maybe boom. Yeah, like the Nicktoons had just started. And like The Simpsons was already a big hit. Beauty and the Beast came out. What's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, Little Mermaid.
Yeah, for sure. So it was like the Disney Renaissance, right? You
Yeah,
had that.
yeah.
You had the Cartoon Network shows like I don't know if Dexter and Powerpuff were starting yet. but-
Actually, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think that had started yet at the time.
No, that would have been like mid to late 90s.
Gotcha.
No, I mean that would have been like maybe '94 or something. Because I remember I was at Klasky Chupo for about 3 years, and somewhere in the middle of that, we started seeing the What a Cartoon shorts. So I don't know, maybe because Gendy and the guys were over there doing like Two Stupid Dogs and stuff like that.
I remember
so.
Two Stupid Dogs. Yeah.
Oh,
So how long was it between you being at that Hanna-Barbera store and you having your first job in animation? Was it a smooth transition, or was there like a year gap or something?
There was like a year gap, yeah, because I worked at that store and then they shut it down. I was like, oh, well, now what am I gonna do? And I just kept doing like promo pieces and like getting like color Xeroxes and putting them on artboard and sending it through like U.S. mail to Scott at Hanna-Barbera and just saying, hey man, if you ever need somebody, I'm here.
That's fantastic. So you made sure that you were in the back of their mind at all times.
That was the one connection I really had like that to a direct thing. Yeah.
So you were grinding the whole time. You were making sure that you weren't forgotten. That's
yeah.
I have a quick question. Did you have any opportunity, or was there even the option to take like classes in this in between time?
Not for anything animation specific. That was probably too early at the time. Yeah. Yeah, you could just take basic courses at the community college that was near me, but nothing animation specific for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you were at your first job, I guess, once you went to Hanna-Barbera. Well, did you mention your first job? I don't think you did, right?
No, that was for MGM Animation on what they called the new Pink Panther.
Oh, that was the first job. All right, cool.
Yeah. And I was green as fuck because I didn't know anything about how animation was really done.
What they had you doing?
Well, they tried me out on character design, and it was obvious I didn't know how to draw it correctly. So then they shifted me over to props, and props I was able to do. They're like, draw some safes and dynamite and pies and all that kind of stuff, the anvils. And so then I started, getting a good feel for how to draw stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and this is when it was all still on paper, obviously, right? The early 90s. So that's something that I'm not familiar with. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Brian might be familiar to an extent with it, but I'm used to just everything being 100% digital, so just even thinking that you're going in there and just like organizing all these giant stacks of prop paper, and it's to me it's mind blowing.
Well, and not knowing anything really, like now kids have to. When a kid asks me like, what do I need to know? I'm like, well, you gotta know Photoshop for sure, and if you could learn how to draw on a tablet or something like that, there's all that the kids need to know, whereas back then it was just like, you can draw here's some paper.
It's a paper too. Yeah. Draw an anvil. What's pretty cool is
when you enter. No, it's okay. The best thing when you enter props, it's the lowest stakes, but it gets you really accustomed to production pipelines. I think that was the most valuable thing I learned. Like when I started animation, I also started in props, and we're at the transition to moving everything digitally. Like I was working digitally, but there are still a lot of aspects of my show. We were still printing things on paper and even sending like CDs to FedEx. Yeah, because there weren't any FTPs or any way to send things digitally to the computer.
Yeah, I think props is definitely it can be a good entry level job.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
there's some shows like, for example, Rick and Morty with which Brian and I both worked on. The props on that show get incredibly intense. So I'm sure that depending on the show, props can definitely be an entry level job. And what I find interesting is your first show was the Pink Panther, which lends itself to that super cartoony, like anvil pie in the face style that you were accustomed to with Bugs Bunny and Warner Brothers cartoons that you grew up with.
Yeah.
So do you think that lends itself on you like kind of having a successful career there? You kind of knew that mindset already?
Yeah, that was a good thing, and also just that they knew that I was a total newbie, So Scott was really like, he was very patient with me learning, because I was like super freaked out. I thought I was going to get fired any minute. And he just said, no, don't worry, because, it wasn't like a big production that had big deadlines yet. It's still a kind of small new thing. So it was good. He definitely held my hand a lot through a bit of that until I kind of got to a basic skill set on that. But it was mainly all just props. Mm-hmm. And then that was like only 6 months, but then I had all my contacts then. So I just asked like some of the people there, anybody else who's hiring? No, why don't you go over to Klasky Chupo? They're starting up this new show called Duckman. It might be cool. And so I went over there and they said, we have a background designer position. You think you want to do that? I'm like, I'll give it a try. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you did backgrounds on Duckman?
Yeah, and I was not good at it. I think all I was able to do was kind of more like background layout, where they had the storyboards done, and you would like just put a giant piece of pan paper over it, and maybe just draw over it to get it into the style of the show, which was really hard. But I wasn't one of those people who could design a whole world for the master shot for the board artist to go off of, and I was always angling to get into the character work. So
I see.
Yeah.
So. Did you need to show like any kind of portfolio when you got over to Duckman or even to Pink Panther? Did you have like a stock portfolio you went to, or was that something
I kind of had a general portfolio of all those promo pieces and stuff that I was like, doing really nice drawings. I would actually hand paint things on cells. I would ink them and paint them to make something look real slick and professional. Nice. And I mean, that just helps. And Scott knew that I was just some young kid who had never worked in animation. But at least with Pink Panther, I at least had a portfolio full of a bunch of stuff that said, I know what to do. And plus, I was able to have one of the directors be my reference for that.
Nice, man. Nice. So was... Oh, sorry.
Cartoon color.
Say that again, Brian?
I'm sorry. I'm sure the advantage of growing up in LA, you can just go down to Cartoon Color and pick up our animation paper.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, actually, straight up from Cartoon Color. Just because I grew up in Santa Monica, so Culver City's right next door. So you just go down there and you could just pick up all these bottles of that and everything. Yeah.
Wow. Can you still do that anywhere?
I don't think that exists anywhere, right?
No, right? You can't unless you like have like a specialized person you're getting it from, like deep online somewhere, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh yeah, different time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that was one of the first shows. That studio was doing a lot of the first digital ink and paint for backgrounds, and later, I can't remember if they were doing some character stuff like that, but definitely for the backgrounds, where you would just get long pan paper with the little animation punch tabs in it, and then you would just tape it together, and then you just turn it in, and it would probably be a PA's job to scan everything in. For the background artists to do, and they were on computers just to do all the backgrounds. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess the pipeline definitely has organically evolved over time. But I can see how that job kind of turns into several other jobs currently. So was that the only show you did backgrounds on, or did you do backgrounds?
Yeah, that was it, because then they started doing All Real Monsters, the old Nicktoon, next door in the other building. And the season was over on Duckman. I heard they were hiring, so I put in my portfolio for that. And the character designer on Duckman, Jerry Richardson, he was always like my biggest champion. He knew I wanted to do characters, and he just wanted to get me in there. So he was definitely recommending me for that. So I got in on that show, and
as a
I eventually worked. Yeah, I learned how to draw like a Russian, because we were working with all these Russian designers, and that was a lot of fun. Definitely not the standard kind of animation drawing. So I was digging that.
Yeah, Klasky Chupo is just like, their character design work is just so outside of any other mainstream character design work. It's just like it's like ugly, but also super appealing, like Tommy Pickles is like by no means like a cute character, but still you want to keep watching him for some reason. Like they know how to walk that line, So what specific skill set did you need to kind of learn in order to draw in that style, or was it something that you easily adapted to?
I think I adapted to it easily because it was really kind of graphic and visually it was very specific. It wasn't like I was trying to draw the cutest, most perfect Disney character. You know, it was just kind of raw and sketchy. It was just perfect for me at that age. Yeah, nice. but I did have to learn about doing turnarounds. You know, that's always one of the basic things.
I was going to ask about that because earlier you said obviously you went in the Pink Panther, but you were doing props, and then this you were doing back and then Duckman backgrounds. But like, I was wondering if, since you didn't actually go to like college to learn this stuff, did you ever practice doing turnarounds before you actually got into the industry?
I think probably if I did like a test somewhere, but no, I think before I got into the industry, I didn't even know about that stuff. I knew I had like model packs that I got as a kid or something, but I didn't really know about how they really did it. I just thought, oh, you just draw them from behind, or you know how to draw them from every angle.
You just look at one angle and you're like, that's it. Yeah. I know the whole thing.
Yeah. Fortunately, it's weird. Like literally my entire career has been learning by doing. You know, I didn't know how to do anything until I got the jobs, and then I was able to acclimate to it. You know. Yeah.
So do you think that's due to a couple things? Like obviously you're talking to these people, you're making friends with these people. You're seeing they're seeing your work, right? But is it also part of you being able to kind of network in a really like kind of a vital way, or do you think it was mostly just the art that you were showing? Because like I feel like nowadays, if somebody goes and say, "Hey, I want to get this job as a character designer," but they've never done a turn, it's very unlikely that they're going to get a job as a character designer. You know?
Yeah. Everybody online now, it looks like full-on visual development artists. It's amazing. But I think there's way more resources for everybody. Because when I was a kid, it's like maybe there was the Illusion of Life book. Maybe there was one others, or if you just happened to, you know, like I got being in LA, just being able to get like Xerox model packs that I kind of sort of knew what the drawings were supposed to look like. You know, because I remember when I first spoke to Scott, who gave me my first job, I said, oh, I don't know how to animate. I don't know if I could ever work in animation. And he's like, oh, no, for TV animation, they don't animate. It's all done in Korea. All you got to do is be able to draw. And that, like, I was like, what? You know, that just things like that help. But I think one of the biggest things that helped me out, it was just timing, because it was such a boom in animation. Yeah. And it was hard to get people with talent. So a lot of studios were just like willing to let anybody take a test. And it wasn't like you needed to know a bunch or have your own setup. You're just like, can you draw? Here's a pencil, some paper. I knew people who were accomplished advertising artists who, just because they had worked with one of the producers back in the 80s at an ad agency, they said, hey, you want to take a test? Because I know you can draw. And then they wound up being like one of the best layout artists ever. And then that became their new career for the next 20, 30 years. Yeah.
So it was kind of the early 90s in television animation, with this creator-driven kind of boom, was kind of the Wild West, or like throw spaghetti against the wall kind of moment of just like seeing what sticks, right?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Shows too.
What was that, Brian?
I said it kind of shows as well if you look at the type of shows that are coming out of that era.
Yeah. It was really great, the individual voices that were present, you know, and just the quality of the artwork as well. I think that's why I really gravitated towards all the original cartoon shorts, and specifically things like Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls.
Well, so what was your next job after? Actually, before I asked about your next job on after Our Real Monsters, did you design any characters that you're super proud of on Our Real Monsters that you can talk about?
Well, I mean, gosh, there were so many, but I don't remember any specifics. That was so long ago. But it's interesting that I did become like the lead character artist on that after the original designer he left to do more development art for the studio, and they said, "Here, you're the supervisor." So I got to kind of redesign, do a more definitive new model pack and do a lot of publicity artwork and stuff like that.
Cool. For like the main characters, for like Ickis and Oblina.
Yeah. And I got to design the artwork for a Super Nintendo game, Real Monsters. So that's kind of cool.
That's fantastic. That's super. How long did you work on Our Real Monsters? The entirety of it?
I guess I keep thinking it was only like 2 seasons or something like that. Because
remember.
Yeah, and during part of the run of that, one of our storyboard artists, he had been at Cal Arts with Gendy and all the guys. So he left to go work on Dexter's Laboratory, And then one of our background designers, he left to go to work on that. And so each one of us was like, hey guys, when can we come visit for lunch or something like that? So I went over there for lunch, and they just brought me into Gendy's office, and him and Craig and Paul Rudish and the guys were just like hanging out. They said, hey, we need a new design. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Why don't you just do a couple pages full of drawings of Dexter and Dee Dee and some poses, and do some like robots or spaceships or something. Do a bunch of stuff and just turn it in. So I had I was on a brief hiatus after Monsters ended, and they were wanting me to work on the new Rugrats that was going to be for the Rugrats movie, and I was kind of like, not really what I'm into. So I'm like, I just hit it hard on this test for Dexter's Lab, and I had like 2 or 3 weeks off, and I just did the test, then turned it in, and Craig just shuffled through it. Gendy looked at it and said, yeah, this is good. Maybe you can start next week or something like that. And I called up Klasky, and I said, I'm not going to work on Rugrats. Sorry, guys. That's. I think it's like somewhere in the middle of first season or second season, something like that. Because I started in '96. So yeah, I think they'd had like maybe the first 6 episodes or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah. You got to work on some of the dialing for Monkey stuff, right?
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 of those. I know there was one with Quackor.
Yeah.
That was.
So you're like the end of season 1 for sure.
Okay, yeah, because I can never remember where that line is drawn on those, but yeah.
Yeah, the seasons were ambiguous back then. They kind of just kept making them. So that's pretty. I find it really interesting that they were just like, hey, do some drawings on this paper and just let's see what you got. So it was kind of like, because nowadays, I mean, a lot of artists aren't big fans of this, but nowadays, we give out tests sometimes to character designers or to background designers, and we kind of have working in production. I see this a lot. Like I see a test that they kind of already have standardized, where they're like, all right, cool, you got to do a turn of this character. You have to do 2 original designs and a special pose or something like that. Or
yeah.
And we kind of throw that out, and that's what we get back. Was that something that was around back then, or was it mostly just like informal kind of chatting and like showing what you got?
Yeah, I don't remember things being so formalized like that. I mean, geez, people were still like smoking and drinking in their offices and stuff like that. And in Hanna-Barbera, it was like after Fred Seibert took over, he cleaned house, and a lot of artists who had been there a long time, they were either let go or a lot of them left. So it was really a thing of like the kids just being handed the keys to the kingdom. And we were lucky. There were still some of the original artists who were still that we got to work with and draw from a lot of their knowledge. But really like a 25 or 26-year-old just being given his own show and just hiring all his buddies out of college. It was crazy ridiculous, but it really worked,
For sure. So Dexter was kind of was Hanna-Barbera as well as Cartoon Network, right? It was
it was for Cartoon Network, but it was made at Hanna-Barbera. Yeah, we were kind of that last wave of actual shows made at the classic studios there out on Cahuenga, which is kind of rad.
Yeah, Dexter and Powerpuff, right? We're both in that vein, or no?
Well, actually, Powerpuff was like Craig pitched the first board for Powerpuff Girls, the series, right as we were finishing up Dexter's Lab before we got absorbed into Warner Brothers when Warner bought Turner.
Oh, okay.
And so they closed up the studios, and we just moved all out to Sherman Oaks to where they were doing like Batman and Superman and all that stuff.
Gotcha. Like the animated series Batman?
Yeah. And they were all up in this
Cartoon Network. I didn't know you guys are over in the mall.
Oh yeah, literally we were next door to the Sherman Oaks Galleria where they filmed all the classic movies, and they were literally tearing that thing down while we were there working, and everybody's toys were falling off their shelves, shaking and stuff.
Like constant earth. You had to draw somehow as you were shaking.
It was totally weird. Yeah, because up in the Warner Brothers Bank Tower, that's where they're doing all the Looney Tunes stuff and all the Bruce Timm shows, and we were just down on the ground floor there, and we were kind of digging it. It was like our own little personal space. And then when they were really tearing that place up, then we had to move across the street to another building, and by that point they realized that Cartoon Network was different from Warner Brothers, and they built Cartoon Network Studios out in Burbank. So I think I was like maybe late 97 or early 98, we had moved out there to Sherman Oaks to be part of Warner Brothers. And I think in like 2000, we moved into Cartoon Network Studios in Burbank.
So you guys were just nomads going wherever they shoved you, huh?
Never had to move so many goddamn toys in my life.
Nice.
I think that was the point where I said, I'm not going to keep so many toys up at the office
I'm going to
anymore.
take a picture of my toys and put them on the wall.
Yeah.
So did you also worked on Powerpuff?
Yeah, Powerpuff Girls, because then the entire crew, we just moved right into that. That was our next step. Yeah. And
did they ever happen in tandem, or were they always?
No, it was totally separate. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Pretty much the only point where things started to separate a little bit is as before we moved to Cartoon Network, Gendy took Dan Kroll, one of our background designers, and they were working on his special project, which wound up being Samurai Jack. And so and pretty much there was a point there where I was working on the very last of the original Powerpuff Girls episodes and then doing first Samurai Jack. So that was, I was bleeding out my eyeballs that time, I think. So I was doing both of those shows at once.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of Gendy and Craig's style, like they kind of set the tone for a lot of cartoons to come afterwards, just because of the graphic nature of their design style. Yeah. It kind of had like a UPA style with Hanna-Barbera. It had like all these different mix and all these different influences. Was that something that you were able to kind of adapt to? And do you like that style particularly?
Yeah.
Because it's not quite the same as Looney Tunes style.
No, but it definitely feeds in with all this all that same era from the mid-century stuff. Especially Hanna-Barbera. That's 100% coming from the UPA mix. And so that, I aimed myself in the direction that I wanted to go, because once I saw Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls shorts, I said, that's the stuff I want to work on.
Oh, cool.
So I got into that. So I was just in my element, just soaking up all of the artwork. Because, I mean, you have guys like Gendy and Craig who are amazing. And then there's like Paul Rudish. And then there was...
Rudish did did he do the Mickey Mouse shorts, or am I thinking somebody else?
Yeah, that's him, yeah. And he was always like the secret weapon for all this, because Dial M for Monkey, that was pretty much always all Paul. And there's a lot of great Dexter's Lab episodes, like when they had the original series finale, the big 3-part special. What was with all the characters together. I mean, he storyboarded like so much of that all himself. Last but not least, that was the title, and he would storyboard tons of all the best Powerpuff Girl episodes, and the same for Samurai Jack. So so learning from guys like him, and we had also like. All of the original Ren and Stimpy crew, you get like Carrie Yost, Don Shank, Chris Riccardi, Lynn Naylor. I mean, it was amazing learning from all those guys. And then when Craig Kelman got into the mix from Powerpuff Girls, I mean, I didn't go to Cal Arts, but I always figure I did Cal Arts Light. I had to work with all those guys and just, absorb everything from them. So that played a major part in my learning. And then I got to see where all those guys' secret stash was, where they say, oh, we're looking at Charlie Harper artwork. We're looking at Provinson's, children's books and Little Golden books.
Wow.
So that's where I learned, what went into the mix.
That's really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people aren't privy to that information that are watching, because those cartoons of the early 90s, mid 90s had such a huge impact on like animation just forever after that point. And like just to kind of dive in and see what those people were like looking at, like it's kind of when you learn what you learn when you're listening to your favorite musician, and then you realize that they like all these bands you've never heard of. You know, it's like, oh, my favorite artists are inspired by all these weird, obscure things that I've never even heard of. So can you mention those things again one more time? The Little Golden Books was one of them, just so people can kind of Google them.
Yeah, well, Charlie Harper. He's very famous for doing all kinds of wildlife illustrations, super graphic, beautiful colors. I mean, you just look him up and you'll just see that that's where so much of the show came from. But Alice and Martin Provenson did a lot of children's books, and those are just incredible. You'll see so much of Samurai Jack there just right off the bat. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then just looking at a lot of those Hanna-Barbera or Disney artists from the 50s, like Tom Oreb. You just look at his stuff, and I mean, it came at the perfect time, along with when the internet was really just becoming the internet as we know it, and eBay was a new thing where all of a sudden you could collect all these old books and old prints and things like that. Yeah, it was great. And cool. Like DVDs coming out around the same time.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of these artists now. It's pretty fantastic.
I don't collect as much now. That's for sure. But it's yeah. Well, that's where I was lucky to have things that were little collectibles they made from the shows that we had. But
is that an original Samurai Jack maquette?
That's let's see here. Yeah, and that's the. Yeah, that was like a special one. I don't think that was available for most of the public, where they wanted to get the gray maquette style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the one you can purchase.
Yeah. Nice.
For viewers or listeners that don't know what maquettes are, Chris, could you kind of explain like what the purpose of that is?
Yeah. Well, usually what they would do, and it would usually be in like feature stuff. I mean, Disney was famous for doing it. They would always have, a three-dimensional sculpt of the characters that the animators could use as reference. Now, we didn't actually use that on Samurai Jack. I think they made that later for the collectible market, but nice to have regardless, for sure, right? For sure.
Yeah. That's pretty neat. So you were basically in that kind of Gendy Craig camp,
Yeah.
You kind of moved from show to show with them.
Yeah.
Well,
it was great.
So after Powerpuff, after Samurai, how long were you on Samurai Jack? And were you a character designer? Were you a lead character designer? Like, what was your role in this?
No, I actually, what we specifically were for most of the time, we were model designers was the title. We would do characters, props, and effects. I even took a stab at doing 1 or 2 storyboards before I realized I don't want to do storyboards. That's a lot of work. Yeah. But and for Samurai Jack, because he already had like Craig Kelman and Andy Naylor doing character designs, could you just do props and effects, because there's always tons of spaceships and robots and stuff blowing up. So that's what I did on Samurai Jack, just props and effects. So, and it just started. We would flip flop back and forth. Then it's like then after a season of that, did the Powerpuff movie. That was done. Then it's more Samurai Jack. Then they're doing more Powerpuff. Then more Labs. So we just jump back and forth on all those.
So everybody kind of everybody was a little bit of a jack of all trades kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they kind of jumped around wherever there was a missing piece of a puzzle, they would squeeze themselves in.
Yeah, more or less, or whatever Gendy or Craig really wanted you to do. Some people were always board artists, but some people could do boards and do character design. It's pretty crazy. There was so many talented people there. Yeah.
What is it about boards you don't really like?
That's a lot of work. One is just the pure tonnage of having to do that much stuff, but also that you're always thinking about it. When you do a character design, you can just perfect. That's done. I'll do some more turns on that later or something like that. But storyboards, you're in the supermarket, you're driving home, you're watching TV, you're always thinking about it. You can't let it go.
Is that how you feel, Brian, when you're boarding? Hey, Brian.
Definitely.
Oh no, he's here.
Hello.
We hear you.
Yeah, you can definitely become more absorbed in the functionality of the board, simply because you have to consider everything, because it's a little bit of design, but it's mainly about like setting up your shots, thinking about the story, sometimes writing as well, like how the story comes together. There's just a lot more on your plate when you board.
Yeah. And I did the boarding on Dexter's Lab, where they would just give you like a 1-page outline and then say, yeah, go ahead, write all the dialogue, and if you feel it should go off in a slightly different direction, do that, which is not the best when you have zero experience in storyboarding, because there were points where I would just be going off on a tangent, and Gendy would say, no, kind of, let's not go that way. Keep going towards the goalpost there. Yeah.
So they were like truly board driven shows. Like they were like the borders. Yeah. I know they still like shows like that still exist nowadays. All the shows I've worked on were always like script shows, so I'm not used to that process of board driven shows, but yeah, I find that really fascinating. Like a lot of the old cartoons like Looney Tunes were all board driven as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they were following in that mode as 90s young animators. We were looking to Looney Tunes, and we had all just watched what they had done on Ren and Stimpy, and we're like, that's the way to go, and it worked out great. At least I think so.
Yeah. You just kind of following up.
Yeah, that was like 7 years. That was like the longest continuous run I'd ever had, with any studio or any gig. Yeah.
Before I ask you what you transitioned into next, one question that I forgot to ask that I always ask to our artists, there was that one point when I was talking about there was that little gap year you had after Hanna-Barbera store and before you went on to Pink Panther. I always ask if there was ever a feeling of doubt or regret in your mind where you're like, I made a bad decision, I shouldn't be doing art for a career, and how you deal with that and how you kind of get over that hump. And maybe you didn't have that, but a lot of artists I know deal with that kind of grappling and war in their head of, am I making the right choice, and how you kind of get through that. Did that ever happen to you?
Not so much that I remembered it at the time, because, growing up in LA, I knew that it was a real thing that people could do. And just the fact that I actually got into the studio, and I had the head of design telling me, yeah, you're good enough. Keep in touch. Maybe we'll have something for you. That just kept fuel in my fire for like that entire year. So that's why I kept, drawing, and then just doing those promo pieces and mailing it to them, a couple times a year. Yeah. Because when somebody tells you you actually have the goods, you're like, it could be real if I just work hard enough.
Yeah. Did they ask you to mail those promo pieces, or is that something you just did?
He just said, keep in touch. So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? Am I going to call him? No, I'm not going to bother him. I'm not going to write him a letter. No, I'm not. I'm just going to mail him my artwork, because maybe he said, just, keep me, what you're drawing or something like that. Yeah. I just tried to make something look as professional and polished as I could.
So you really took the initiative. Yeah, that kind of reminds me. I had a friend that did something similar, who was a big fan of Adult Swim when they were kind of in their earliest iteration, like over at, I guess, in Atlanta, when they were doing just kind of, what was it, Aqua Teen and Space Ghost and all that stuff. And he was making fan art of that stuff, and he was sending it to them, and it looked really good. And at one point he went there because he was in Atlanta for a tour, and they're like, oh shit, you're the guy that did all that fan art. We've been keeping that. We love this fan art. And they gave him a tour, and eventually, like less than a few months later, he ended up getting a job as a PA there. And then eventually he became an artist there. Nice. So like occasionally, I know you were getting a lot of encouragement from your art as well, by showing them the stuff you were doing, but like that kind of stuff really does work, and it sets you up for like a really positive path, if you approach it with tact. Like, obviously,
if you approach it with tact,
crazy people could be sending like a million horrible drawings to like Gendy Tartakovsky saying, look at all these drawings, hire me. Like, don't do that. But
that's what's beautiful now, that there's all these image hosting sites. Everybody can just post their artwork on the page. Yeah, and then you could just say, hey, you could look at my stuff and send a link, because people, all of us pros, we can't like accept something that's sent to us and somebody says, here's my script or here's my show idea. We're like, sorry, nothing personal, but we legally can't do that, because the lawyers tell us that if we even are doing a show that we've been doing an episode for 6 months already that has something in common with yours, you're going to think we ripped you off, and then you're going to sue us and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, we literally can't even do that. But if we just go over to their Instagram and take a look at their fan art, we're like, that's pretty good. We should hire them.
For sure. As somebody that works in production, as somebody that hires artists, like, that's something I do. I mean, I look at portfolios, obviously, but I always go over to their personal websites, and I go over to their Instagram, and I kind of see like some of the stuff they draw for fun. And a lot of times, like, if that translates to the show style we're working on or something, then that's definitely a check mark for them. It's like, oh, then they might be right for this position.
I know several artists who have gotten like character design work simply because of their work from DeviantArt.
Nice. DeviantArt is a big one. Yeah, for sure. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I guess times have changed. Now everything's digital. Obviously, people probably aren't going to be snail mailing fan art anymore.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that probably wouldn't get opened. Unless you knew them. I had an actual in, so he was opening it up.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So now you can just send links to, hey, here's my fan art I did, and I know. Yeah, a lot of artists, I'm sure, like before they become show creators or before they become big character designers, they're doing fan art of all their favorite stuff. It's out there somewhere. Cool. So let's get back on track to, you were over at Samurai Jack. That was winding up. That's what you ended your first Cartoon Network run?
Actually, I had ended on like one of the later seasons of Powerpuff Girls, because after we did the Powerpuff Girls movie, then we did more episodes, kind of capitalized on that, and then there was more Dexter's Lab. So it was kind of back and forth, but I think the last thing I worked on was more Powerpuff Girls.
Cool. What did you transition to after that?
Well, I was looking around for something new because Craig was doing Foster's Home. He was getting Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends started, but everything was already filled up. He already had all the designers he needed. You know, there's only so many jobs. So I contacted a friend over at Warner Brothers, and they slid my artwork under Eric Radomski's door because he was doing a second season of Xiaolin Showdown.
Oh yeah, I remember that show.
And and so that was something very different stylistically, which seemed like a good idea to me to try to wash the very stylistic Cartoon Network style out, because I needed to at least change it up a little bit. And that's where I met our good friend Matt Danner, because he was art director on the first season. He was episodic director for that second season. So that's why I came on board that and kind of switched things up for a little bit.
For sure. How would you describe the style on Xiaolin Showdown? It was kind of like, from what I remember, did it have a little anime influence? Not really. It kind of was like. Yeah. What would you describe the style as?
Wow, yeah, I'm not really sure. Well, anything that came from Danner's pen always had like this really cool original style that once again was another mishmash of everything. There's like some video game artwork, there's Muppets, there's anime, there's so many different things. So all I really knew that it was at least different, is more dimensional. And so which helped coming out of that UPA style to be working on something to work a dimension in. So it was something different from what I've been working on. Was a big thing.
Nice, man. It's pretty cool. And how long were you on Xiaolin?
There was just that one season, and then Danner had already been doing a bunch of shorts in Flash, which is the new thing. He did several pilots for WB All in Flash, and they said, why don't you try to do this new show, since you proved you're good at doing this all Flash show? Why don't you be in charge? They told Danner, why don't you be in charge of this new show we're doing called Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
So Danner pulled me on board with that, and he said, let's try to create a new look for this new show. And I just went off of what he had started, and I decided, okay, I'm going to go for something totally different, not the UPA stuff. I'm going to try to do all my stuff that's influenced from Mad Magazine artists, like Paul Coker and Susie Aragonés, but definitely Paul Coker was one of the big ones that I tried to work in there. And so, did that for another like 6 or 7 months, something like that.
So you got free reign to kind of just do your own thing with Coconut Fred?
Yeah. I mean, just working off of what Danner did, because he had designed all the original stuff for the pilot and the look of it. And then, but he said, let's work together to try to develop an overall series style for this. And so, he just said, that's great. I love it. Let's do it.
Nice. That's pretty cool, man. Nice. What, and I guess after that, so you were saying you were influenced by a lot of Mad Magazine creators for Coconut Fred, right? So I know a lot of times Mad Magazine style is very, they have a lot of like grotesque close-ups and they have very detailed drawings. Did you have to like scale it back and simplify it for like animation?
Not so much, really. I think because it was Flash, they were able to design all the assets to be fairly detailed, and they were using a lot of photoreal textures on all the characters with their fruit skin and on the backgrounds and stuff like that. So we didn't have to do it, scale back all the detail too much, really. It's kind of
that's actually interesting, because when you're working in Flash or now Harmony, like you can basically take like a realistic drawing and just kind of puppet it. So it doesn't need to be like as animatable as like some of those early drawings did, like for, let's say, Dexter or something like that, right? So you have a little more free reign in what you can do, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, most of my style is in very strong, simplified graphic stuff, and shows that I worked on, with Gendy and Craig showed me the value of having really strong, simple designs, and that's even what I grew up with, with the old original Hanna-Barbera stuff. It really helps if you have stuff that is a very bold, strong design and is simple. It visually communicates things, and it's easier to pose for everybody. Board artists, animators. It works keeping things simple like that. So I didn't try to overly complicate things with Coconut Fred. It's just trying some new styles that luckily worked with what they wanted.
Nice, man. That's cool. So what were some of the things you worked on after that?
I started hopping around, and there weren't as many regular gigs for a while. I worked on at Film Roman. They were doing the Secret Life, the Haunted World of El Superbeasto.
Oh, the movie.
On the Robs. And I was working with a lot of my pals from Samurai Jack and Powerpuff Girls, and Doug Lawrence was the director. And basically, at some point, Film Roman was trying to transition into doing motion pictures as part of Star Entertainment, and then they just said, we don't know what this thing is. We're just shutting it down, And so we said, okay, well, that movie didn't happen. And then several years later, they, after Halloween came out, they decided, oh, this Rob Zombie guy, he's got a big audience. Maybe we got to take this movie of his and put it out. And I don't think any of us original artists were on that, and we were only really in pre-production. So they just had another crew kind of finish it, and it just came out to videos. Yeah, it was kind of different than what we were doing. So, but it was a fun time.
That's interesting. I didn't know there was an earlier iteration of that, because I remember, because I was always a big and fan of weird stuff, and I remember when that came out, and I was excited to watch it. At the time, I was a Rob Zombie fan, so I was kind of in that vein. And I remember watching it, thinking it was pretty cool. I didn't realize there was like an earlier iteration that was going to be directed by Mr. Lawrence. Yeah, that's pretty rad.
Yeah, and after that, I went over to Nickelodeon for a bit. I helped out with some special poses for El Tigre.
Oh yeah,
it was a great time. And then I worked for the first season of the Mighty Bee, Eric Weiss and Cynthia True show.
Oh, that's a great one, man. That's an underappreciated gem. I love that show.
Yeah. So you can definitely see there's like a through line with a lot of the projects that I choose and the people I like to work with, but definitely the visual stuff. It's like cartoony stuff, strong design, both classic stuff and new stuff. But there's definitely a focus that I tend to lean towards. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And what are you working on now?
I'm nothing right now. I'm at home. Much like everybody else, and looking for work in a pandemic. But freelancing from time to time. What's been nice is that a lot of the bigger projects I've worked on, I've actually done at home. Like a couple of years ago, I redesigned the Flintstones for Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs, which kind of sat on a shelf for a while and aired in the UK. My work on Teen Titans Go, that attracted the attention of Marvel consumer products. So I got to do a bunch of stuff for Marvel. Nice. A lot of that stuff I just done from home, but at the moment, just looking to see what's coming up, because it's
nice, man.
Yeah, it's a weird time now for sure.
Is Yabba Dabba gonna air on HBO Max? Do you know?
I have no idea, honestly. Yeah.
I remember seeing that. That was the one where like it's Bam Bam and Pebbles and Dino's story, kind of, right?
Yeah, and then they threw in the classic characters. They wanted to have a bigger presence for them, so it's kind of cool. I got to do newish versions of those as well.
Yeah, I've heard rumors. I don't know too much about it, but there's going to be some kind of new Hanna-Barbera content coming out called Jellystone.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you've seen that. Yeah, Carl Greenblatt has been doing that.
Right.
He's posted some of his art. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he's a great guy to be in charge of something fun like that.
It's pretty neat. So I heard you talk a lot throughout this whole conversation about like strong poses, like when you're referring to character design, like simple silhouette and stuff like that. So a lot of obviously a lot of up and coming character designers are listening and watching or will listen and will watch down the line. Mm-hmm. So something that we love to have our guests do is kind of give some pointers, that they might be weary of, that they've learned throughout their tenure as an artist, to up and coming artists in their same category. So do you have any like pointers and advice for like up and coming people that want to be character designers?
Well, I would always say start with whatever your favorite stuff is, the stuff that you would like to draw, and check out those artists' Instagram or Tumblr or website, whatever they have things that are posted of their actual drawings for animation, not their full finished color illustrations, but if they post black and white line work. That's a great starting place to learn how things are drawn for animation. That you don't just always draw all the wild, crazy poses. You're going to draw the characters standing there and from all the angles. Mm-hmm. To learn how to put dimension into things. That's a big one. A lot of people, especially if they see flat graphic shows, they think, oh, everything's just flat like paper. It's like, not really. That's the first glance, but like Brian was talking about, you when we were talking about props, you have to learn how to draw things with dimension and simplify it. So when you're doing props, you're doing boxy things like cars and stuff like that. That works out well. It's a little bit tougher to get to learn that for actual organic humans and animals and things like that. But that's a big part. Yeah.
How big was studying like human anatomy for you as a character designer?
I wish it had been more. that's probably one of the best things is if you know real human anatomy, then you know the rules and you could break those rules, even if you're doing cartoony stuff. But yeah, I never really studied real anatomy, and it shows if you ever ask me to draw anything real. That's why, you know, the Dexter's Lab cartoony stuff with little sausage fingers and things like that, it works out really good for me. Yeah.
Sure.
But if you can learn to draw real first, that's all the better.
I hear ya. Yeah, I know. So one thing as a production person, I occasionally I see people.
Oh, you know what? I'm actually running low on my phone battery here. Maybe I should switch over to desktop, perhaps. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. If you want. Yeah.
Give me a minute. I'm gonna check out and just jump back in. Okay.
Cool. Go for it.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate some of the things Chris was talking about. How you should drawing anatomy is super important. It's like learning the fundamentals and then breaking the fundamentals, and then also that also helps inform when you're doing props. It's not just like you're drawing a laser gun or a washing machine. You also kind of learn to develop certain show styles, which you still have to know props. Just some of the things Chris was talking about. How you
I hear your voice over there, Brian.
Super important. It's I think the fundamentals, and then also that also helps inform when you're doing.
If that's the delay.
It's like you're drawing a laser gun or a washing machine. You also kind of learn to develop certain shows.
We're traveling in time. You there, Chris? I don't hear you.
Yeah, it's all new, folks. We're learning. Sorry. Fundamentals, and then also that also helps inform when you're doing.
That's the delay.
It's like you're drawing a laser gun or a washing machine. You also kind of
Chris, do you have headphones, perhaps?
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had too many windows open, and yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Brian was just reiterating the importance of the fundamentals of character design. Talking about all that stuff, right, Brian?
Yeah, bring me up to speed on that one. I missed that.
We were talking about character and props. That's fine.
Oh. Yeah. So I guess with so I was gonna say before with you were talking about I forget how you phrased it, but the physics of a character, how a fold will go over a body, and how how when a foot touches the floor, actually how it affects the ankle and all that stuff. I feel something I see a lot in when I'm looking at people's portfolios and younger people's. Which is, I think, something I see a lot, not just in the art world, but also in the production and the things, in all types of jobs. A lot of times, the best teacher is just kind of doing it, learning at on the spot, faking it till you make it to an extent.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that things, people are expected to be an instant professional these days, but I think people have way more resources, at least, because, you're not relying on one book or trying to pause and rewind a videotape to watch how to draw things. I think it really helps that people have resources that they can go to and really learn how to draw, and even if you can get a cheaper digital setup, just so you can familiarize yourself with the tools,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any resources that you know of that you can kind of shout out to any up and coming artists that you like?
Oh, gosh. There's so many, especially, in the past week or so, there's so many. I'm still discovering new artists every other week that I didn't even know about, since they're a storyboard artist at Nickelodeon already. They're not so new as I thought. So yeah, It's hard to name any in particular because it's just a wealth of talent out there. It's amazing.
For sure, for sure. So one thing I wanted to ask you earlier was when it comes to turning characters, I notice a lot of people kind of, as far as like looking through portfolios and stuff, that's something that stands out to me as is one of the most challenging things to get right. So as a character designer, do you have any like pointers on how to like turn a character properly?
Well, I mean, it's always that thing of trying to do a simplified breakdown of the character, where it's that old thing of making circles and tubes. You know, you can't break the head up into a simplified shape, and you treat the arms like they're tubes with little balls to connect the elbows. Just make them into simplified shapes, and then maybe you draw like a simplified grid around that. So it's kind of a way you have to train your brain to start to look at things after a while. That takes time, but usually when you break things up into simple shapes and you're just turning, some tubes and a circle in a certain. Sometimes flipping the drawings and things like that.
Sure, yeah, it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix. Eventually, you'll just see the ones and zeros. You'll just see the cones and the rods, and you'll be able to turn them a little easier.
It is like that, and after a while, you can look at drawings and go instantly like, no, they need to pull that shape out a little bit. That the perspective is off on that leg or something. It really does become a thing of doing it until you start to see it and grow your talent.
That's pretty cool. So do you have any other advice for any up and coming character designers out there?
I mean, just what you're doing. If you're drawing, just keep doing it, keep exploring, try to broaden your horizons, look at new styles that you haven't figured out, or look at old artists like we did back then. I didn't know about all these children's book illustrators from the 50s, and then that even opened up my world when I saw how they did certain things. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can draw a horse now, which are usually impossible. But when I looked at how the Provincents did horses, I'm like, I get it.
Nice.
And I always used to say it's always good to draw outside of your comfort range, because you might draw monsters really great and the show wants you to do monsters on their show, but then they say, oh yeah, you need to draw regular background people too. So you're going to have to figure out how to draw the regular stuff as well. If there's, or if you can't draw horses, for instance, but you're going to get hired on a Western show or something, like, yeah, might as well try to do the stuff that you can't draw as well, because you're going to need to do it at some time.
I hear you. Cool. Yeah. So basically just don't shy away from any style. Try everything.
Yeah. I know some artists, they can do full on superhero stuff, and then they could also do primetime animated adult comedy stuff. And I'm amazed at the talent that they can do that. But those guys have twice as many jobs to choose from. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. The more you're capable of, the more potential you have to be hired in any aspect of it. Yeah. I know at one point there was this, I was reviewing his portfolio that was mostly like really great, super dynamic superhero poses, and this guy was fantastic. It was wonderful. And at one point, we asked him to do like an original character for this really cartoony show, and he couldn't quite get the style because he was mostly in that kind of superhero mindset, So that kind of shows branching out and doing other things. Even though you can draw the super realistic, crazy superhero pose, being able to simplify that into like something more like the regular show or like Adventure Time isn't that easy. That stuff's deceivingly simple. It's not actually simple. It's deceivingly simple because it all follows the fundamentals of physics and drawing and anatomy, which is interesting.
And I even had things where hired on a show once to do characters, and then the show had to shut down for a while because the writers weren't working out. And they said, well, we'll hope to figure this out, and maybe we'll hire you back. I'm like, yeah, I hope. And they did bring the show back with a new writing staff. And then they said, we used up all of our budget for your character designer position, but you can do props. You can still work props. And I was like, well, that's okay, because I'd like to just keep working, and at the meantime, I can still be getting my medical hours, because it was a union show, and how your medical coverage for your family will be based on the hours you work and things like that. So I'm like, yeah, I don't mind working, and then just aiming towards maybe whenever I could get another character job. So that kept me working for another like 9 months or something, just because I could do props.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So what was your favorite show you ever worked on?
Well, it was definitely the one I spent the most talking about, where it's just that whole chunk of time working for Gendy and Craig. And it's hard to choose one, but it's like Dexter's, Powerpuff, Samurai Jack, that whole time, because those were incredible shows. I mean, I was already a fan of some of them before I got to work on them. And a great experience with great people. And the shows are great because you could have a great experience working with people, but the show is trash.
Yeah.
Or a great show, but you have a terrible time with the people. But that was just all of them. It was just great. It's a good, I guess, and a good time for developing my skills because, like I said, that's when I went to Cal Arts Light and up my own. I leveled up on that one.
Nice. He has a big level. Nice. Yeah, and those shows were not just, they weren't just good. They were impactful for, generations to come. They left a lasting impact, which is pretty cool.
It's kind of cool. You don't think about that while you're doing it, and it's just cool. Like if people are watching it and having a good time, and you get more seasons, and you keep working. But when you actually work on something that really held up and stands the test of time and is considered something noteworthy, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure Brian didn't think Rick and Morty would be as big as it was when he was working on the pilot. It's like, what is this?
Not at all. I mean, even when we were on Titans, I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, Titans is huge. Isn't that Cartoon Network's biggest show, or it was at one point, right?
It may have dropped to number 2, but yeah, for at least 4 to 5 solid years, it was number 1 in the network.
Wow, that's incredible. Especially after all that backlash in the beginning, where all the purists were like, "No, what happened to the original Teen Titans?"
I think that helped us because I was a fan of the original Teen Titans, but I'm like, this isn't that show, dude. It's a comedy.
Yeah. And it's great. It's really funny. It's dark too.
Weren't happy with the original Teen Titans because it wasn't Batman. It wasn't Bruce Timm's Batman. They were like, "What's with all this anime shit? Why are they and stuff?" It's like, well, it's different. There's always Batman.
Yeah, when the new Titans started, I was like, when the original Titans started, I was like, this show's incredible.
Yeah. It took like the sensibilities of the anime, and it took like the Bruce Timm kind of mentality as well, and it kind of mushed them together really nicely, which is rare. You don't really see that too much. Like having the Western and Eastern styles kind of combine.
Yeah.
Kind of like
that show. That was great.
Yeah.
A lot of friends are working on that. So when I was just looking for a new gig and Aaron Horvath contacted me, he's like, "Hey, we're doing Titans over here. You want to come on over?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, that's the only DC comic book I ever read, and I love the original show." So yeah, anytime I was designing anything, I just pulled out all my DVDs of the whole series, or pulled out the original comics because I was down.
Nice, man. Nice. So, what would be, Chris? What would be your dream project, whether it exists or doesn't exist, or maybe existed a long time ago? What would be your dream project to work on, and what role would you play in that project?
Well, of course, surprising nobody for anybody talking to an artist my age. If I said I got to work on a Star Wars cartoon, that's the one thing I haven't done. I got to draw I got to design the Flintstones. I even did some Scooby-Doo stuff once. I've drawn little bits in Looney Tunes. I got to do all the Marvel characters for Marvel. So I'm like, if only I could just do an official Star Wars thing, that would be, that'd be.
Where were you when Tartakovsky was doing his Clone War?
Well, I was working on Dexter's Lab just right over the wall from him. Pretty much all of us were like, Gendy, if you need an extra hand, but those were only those like 3-minute ones. They're really short.
Yeah.
So, and he had like
I love those.
Yeah, and he had like the last couple artists who were still finishing up their rotation on Samurai Jack. Mm-hmm. So he's like, "It's okay, got it covered."
Oh shit! So some of the artists did get to go. Some of the artists did get to go over there.
Yeah. So I mean, those were all just done in house there at Cartoon Network. So.
Oh, they weren't shipped overseas to animate.
Well, overseas animation, yeah, but as far as all the designs and like layout posts and stuff like that, yeah, just done right there in Burbank at Cartoon Network.
Wow, yeah, those are fucking great, man. I think that's
awesome.
Some of my favorite Star Wars content ever created. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I was finishing up college when those were coming up, and I was like, while I was working on my thesis, those like my thesis is somewhat based on Samurai Jack, but when I saw those Star Wars cartoons, I was like, man, if I only could redo this thesis to match those Star Wars cartoons, have been fantastic.
Yeah. Dude, they do not get any love anymore. I don't know what's going on. Like, they're not on Disney Plus. Why not? They should be up there.
Because they're not canon anymore.
I know, it's a shame.
And I don't even know how the ownership of these things worked out, because that was produced by Cartoon Network, and so I put out on Warner Home Video. So I don't even.
Yeah.
But
that's why I got those DVDs. I'm not letting those go.
Yep. Hang on, man. Yeah.
The vault.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
go right next to the Ewoks and the Droids cartoon series.
And the holiday special. No, I'm joking.
ooh,
Yeah.
I do hold out hope at some point that maybe there will be something, because I mean, with all the new content that keeps being made, I'm like, maybe I'll get a chance, you know.
I would be so surprised if they didn't create some type of 2D animated Star Wars content in the future, because like, you know, they're going to create Star Wars content forever at this point. You know, they have no chance they're going to be slowing down. Obviously, certain things are more successful than others, but I mean, 2D animation is still successful as far as television animation goes, you know, so I feel like it's going to happen eventually. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not, maybe not. I don't know.
Hopefully, yeah, you know. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, even if I get to design something like for a T-shirt or a poster or something like that, I'll consider that a win. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can do your Jawas.
Sure, man. Yeah.
What was that? Oh, wait, I just missed. I heard two things at once. What were the two things we just said? Did Brian, you said something?
Oh, I just mentioned Chris has this little Jawa in the corner. They
Oh,
should make
yeah.
an anime series out of that.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Did you design that?
Yeah, this was just something that I did an original piece like for a charity auction, and because it needed to be something that would bring money for a coworker's son who was undergoing medical treatment, I said, I'm going to do something very commercial, and everybody loves this little doodle I did on a Post-it, so I'm going to make a full digital piece on that.
Beautiful.
Sold great, and I figured I just started using that as like my avatar and doing things with that in other ways. And when I was teaching out in Denmark at an animation school out there, one of the graduate students said, "Hey, I'll do a sculpt of that if you promote it on your social media." I'm like, "You got it, man."
Nice. That's awesome, dude. It's a nice piece.
Yeah, I'm happy to have that. It's kind of nice.
For sure. So, Nick, you said you have some fan questions?
Yeah, multiple times. Yeah, they were still there. Now first, it's funny because I was working at that Hanna-Barbera store. They had them come in a couple times and do signings of animation art books. So I got to meet them there. And then when I went over to the studio, they were always there. You know, they were like the the president emeritus. You know, they were there still signing all their animation cells, and they had like 90th birthday parties there. And yeah, they were always very, very friendly old guys there, just to talk to.
That's so freaking cool. They got to hang out with those guys.
Yeah, and I think when we opened up Cartoon Network Studios, Joe Barbera came over there, and he was christening the building in the front of the building, and he went to smash a bottle of champagne on the little corner support beam, and it wouldn't smash. You know, it just like dented a little bit of the plaque. I can't remember if they put up a plaque for that, but yeah, no, it was very cool being able to hang out with those guys occasionally. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Well, yeah. A lot of times it depends on who has a certain specialty. You know, if you know that there's going to be a lot of weird demonic monsters that are going to be done in a Jack Kirby style, they might give it to one of those artists where that's their strength. And yeah, like early on, again, this was the thing where the prop thing really helped me out, because not having gone to Cal Arts, I did not have the skills that all those other artists did, but I could still draw giant robots really well and all these spaceships and tech really well. So Gendy just said, okay, you do those robots, do all the giant laser guns and spaceships and stuff like that, while my character skills got up to speed. So that worked out well. You know. And even on Titans, I mean, I was mainly, I haven't done props much at all, but on Titans occasionally when they had a giant robot that was almost kind of a character in and of itself, or they had something that was tied to a character like Robin's motorcycle, it's like, Battle, why don't you do that? I'm like, oh, why did I let them know I could draw? Now I have to draw a transforming motorcycle, that turns it back into a briefcase or something.
Yeah, that's funny. Nice.
Okay, well, I didn't work on the Titans movie because I was too busy still working on the TV show because they didn't wait to like shut down the show and then make a movie. They were making them at the same time. So some of the crew was working on that. There was new crew, and then the rest of us were still working on the movie. I mean, sorry, on the TV show. Powerpuff Girls, the show had ended, and so a bunch of us went over to Samurai Jack, and at that same time, Craig and several of the board artists started breaking down the Powerpuff Girls movie. And so that was pretty cool because we had way more time. Instead of pumping out a new episode every 1 to 2 weeks, we had months just to do that and really take our time and do a lot of that. And it was bigger, of course. There's more characters, more poses, and you're trying to add like tone levels on there to give it more of a feature look. But yeah, it was just time. Well, for designers like us, it felt like have forever, but they brought in a whole crew of like feature animation artists, and they put a ton of animation desks into one of the conference rooms where they used to do all the pitches and meetings, and they just had them working like crazy doing layout and things like that. So it might have been nuts for them, but for just us TV designers, it was like, you mean I get like 3 weeks just to design this one robot? Great.
That's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, Samurai Jack. I mean, that was just a sequel. It was, Gendy did that, so that I don't even look at that as a reboot. That's a straight up sequel by the originals. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of cool when you have
that's a conclusion to what he had.
Yeah, right. I think it's pretty cool that when you get to work on something that is not only a hit but becomes such a big, such a success in and of itself that it influences people years later to make a new one. I mean, Teen Titans is one example of that. I mean, that was an original show. I mean, based on a 60-year-old property that was a big comic book in the 80s, but then we got to do a new version of that. So it's always kind of cool when you've worked on like the original of something that is beloved. I mean, it's kind of cool to see different interpretations. I mean, like Powerpuff Girls Z. How crazy was that? I mean, we were
that was kind of cool.
A lot by anime. I mean, it was mid-century animation and a lot of the Golden Book art, but also anime worked its way well into the original Powerpuff Girls series. So actually seeing then a literal anime being made out of that was cool. And then Powerpuff Girls is still such a beloved thing. They made another version of that. So I was actually while that was on the air, I was actually in Tokyo. And I saw a girl walking by with one of those little high-class, little fashion belt purses, the Powerpuff Girls. And I'm like, I did not think I'd be seeing that in like 26.
Yeah, that's pretty great. So before Nick goes to the next question, I recently binge-watched the newest iteration of Looney Tunes, which I thought was fantastic. So speaking of reboots and new iterations, did you watch the new Looney Tunes yet? I personally thought it was great. Did you have any thoughts on it?
Those are great. I mean, just the artistry is amazing, and then just the fact that they're back to just being simple gag-based stuff. I mean, man, it's really great. I'm digging those a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't really miss a beat from the originals. Like it feels like a lot of times you're watching some of the original, like Clampett or Chuck Jones ones, and I know I hear people kind of some of the gripes I hear online about them are they're getting a little too like grotesque or like ultra violent, which I personally think is fantastic. I love that stuff,
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun when you can give artists free reign on things,
Yeah. I think I binge watched them twice through, like as soon as they came out. They were really nice. They were awesome. How's it worded?
Mm. I got
I would say within a month that'd be pretty tough unless you have all that work sitting by. I mean,
definitely.
I know that there were some links. A lot of people lately were putting up a lot of links all over Twitter about like a lot of reference things people were putting out towards how to build a good portfolio or what people are looking for. I mean that's a tough one. You have to make things that look like professionals are doing. I mean that's always the thing. You got to be able to draw at a professional level and try your best to draw like that and present that as your portfolio. But as far as the one about trying to do a little bit of everything, that can be kind of tough. I mean, obviously, the more things you can draw, that's better for you. There's the whole jack of all trades, master of none. I don't know, but I know that when I started, my character skills were not good enough, I don't think, but my prop skills were good. That kept me floating, because who knows? People might look at your characters and say these aren't very good, but these other drawings you're doing are great. Have you ever tried storyboarding or something? They might just like you did a really cool scenery behind some characters that didn't look good, and maybe they want you to try backgrounds. So maybe sometimes it's not a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I think probably that was my focus because I always like drawing characters. Yeah, and of course that's like the rock star job, as they all say. Because if somebody says, oh, yeah, prop design on Looney Tunes, people are like, what's that? Or something. But sometimes if you have a focus, if you really want to do one thing, maybe it's a good idea to lean into that. But you never do know where your talent may lie. I remember. At one studio I was at, it was in the early 90s, where they were kind of giving everybody a try. There was somebody who was a kind of an indie cartoonist, and they were doing characters, and the character stuff didn't work out that well for them. But then they said, we really like you, and you're a good artist. You want to try storyboards? And because they were a comic strip artist, they were really good at doing the sequential stuff. They were very well at being a storyboard artist. And then they moved on and became a director eventually. So I guess it's a good idea to keep yourself open to new things.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend to that person, if possible, produce like a short cartoon for yourself. And when I mean short, I mean like 30 seconds to a minute, like no longer than that. Because what you'll learn from that is like what you like doing and what you hate doing. Especially if you do it all or mostly by yourself. Because like I know I don't like doing backgrounds. I did backgrounds on my short film and I never done it again. Just like with Chris, when you did a storyboard, you're like, oh, I don't like doing storyboards. You kind of figure it out by doing, and then once you know that, you'll know how to like sell yourself and sell your portfolio. And just like Chris mentioned earlier, like if you're really awesome with character designs, you don't want to have like kind of funky backgrounds kind of messing up your portfolio. Definitely give yourself the room to put your best foot forward. You don't have to show everything if you're not good at the other things that you don't want to do in the first place.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, if you already love drawing cars and love drawing spaceships and stuff like that, you don't have to kill yourself trying to draw characters, because there's plenty of work doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have a specialty, lean into it. Why not? Okay. Definitely. I think ever since things really got heavily online in the past 10 years, I would say it's really opened up the doors for people to network with real pros, because, it's not like you're bothering somebody in a restaurant or something. It's not, infringing on their time. If you reach out to them and they message you back and they want to talk to you, that's fine. If you start a dialogue naturally, that's great. It's really a reality now, which is very cool. And also, I think there was an earlier question somebody had about, is it possible to work remotely? I think anything the pandemic has taught us that is even more of a thing. I mean, already there were certain people, if you are like really good, really, really good, mm-hmm. people will let you work from wherever. If you're in another area and you can't move, you can work remotely. I mean, that's not often the case, but if you're really good, you have exactly what they want, that can happen. But now we're all working remotely, and the studios are finding it's working quite well. As long as you have the whole setup to work digitally, and work at that professional level, that might be more of a possibility now than it ever was.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, let's see. What favorite design for Dan versus? Wow. God, there was so many things that we did so many things pumping out those 3 seasons. Wow. I guess there was a cool one where I got to design a character for Felicia Day. She did the voice, so I kind of made it a redhead that was kind of like her. She was this executive, and then she turned into a demon monster lady, and then she turned into a giant, demon monster. Something like a Balrog kind of a character. So I get to do all those and have a famous person do the voice. So that was kind of cool.
Nice. That's really cool. Sick. Is Nick still around? Nick, did you disappear? Oh, okay, you're frozen. Oh, no worries.
Yeah, well, back in like 2005, I think that was the first wave when, like the people who were really ahead of the game had their own websites and everything. But I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm going to pay to have a whole website thing, and I can't do the web design myself. And then certain people started getting on the old Blogger platform. And so there was a friend, there were 2 friends of mine. They each had a thing where they were going for jobs. One friend, he had to like FedEx his physical portfolio up to Redwood City to get it to some executive up at PDI before he got on a plane to go to China or something, and got it up there right at the last minute. And he looked through it. He said, okay, yeah, this guy could have the job. So he was like, I just made it. Another friend of mine, she already had website up. They just she just emailed the link. They looked at it and said, oh yeah, sure, you got the job. She didn't even have to sweat it. So I was like, that sounds like getting on the web is a good thing. And I got in just in that wave of all the first animators getting online. And it really raised my profile. Not only that I got attention, but I started doing new artwork and doing digital full color stuff and sprucing up my old artwork. And people said, wow, I had no idea you worked on all my favorite shows. I know Gandhi, I know Craig, but I didn't know all these individual artists. So it paid off huge. So each different new platform came along. Then I get on Tumblr. And then when that started waning, I got on Instagram, and I just jumping around, and I finally bit the bullet. I really did it now, and I got on Twitter now. So, which is a gnarly time to be on Twitter, but so I'm at Chris Battle Art on pretty much all platforms: Instagram, ArtStation, Tumblr, and Twitter now. So I'm in it.
Nice.
If it's something that I'm not super familiar with, it could be like a month or 2, maybe. But even if it is something that like Teen Titans Go, when I looked at that, I'm like, oh, this looks like Dexter's Lab meets El Tigre. I could totally get in on that. But even those first 3 weeks, I was like, oh, I don't know if I have this figured out yet. It always takes a little while to figure something out. But generally, any show, there's probably about a month, maybe 2, where you're kind of sweating it. Yeah. I mean, all artists always slip all kind of jokes in there, whether it's an in joke and you're designing a family member or crew members, or background designers get to put in all the jokes, put in all the little dirty jokes that then 20 years later they're still discovering the things that people slipped in Powerpuff Girls backgrounds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's always fun. We do that where we can. Sometimes character designers get to do it less because all of our stuff is right up front, but sometimes we do. And the most challenging thing, I think Mighty B was probably the most challenging because, as you could see by the finished product, we were really aiming for really high quality work that really looked more fully animated than your average TV stuff, and trying to pose it out and having a show that was set in San Francisco but felt like San Francisco. I think for all the background artists, that was a challenge. And for, all of us designers, we had to design more crowds and everything. And we were really trying to do high quality product that lived up to the vision that Eric and Cynthia and Amy Poehler had, because it's her character as well.
Mm-hmm. Nice, man. Yeah, people need to go back and revisit that show. That show is great. I wonder, is it on any streaming platforms? It might be on Hulu or something like that.
Good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, all the rights to everything keep changing every other week.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all that stuff. Nice. Do we have any other fan questions, Nick, or is that where we're going to cap it? Nice. Well, I think for a first digital interview, with the exception of a few small technical difficulties, this went relatively smoothly, I would say. Not bad. I think we might be doing this again in the future at some point, with Sabrina on board as well.
Very, very soon, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. So, Brian, do you have any words of wisdom? If Sabrina was here, she would ask you. So I guess I'm going to fill in for her and say, do you have any Brian's words of wisdom?
Yeah, thanks. I think I just want to kind of reiterate parts of Chris's story, is the fact that it doesn't matter what era you grew up in. It's simply the basics are connections and applying yourself, because Chris luckily was out here in California, and same was I in LA. So unlike Chris, I didn't even think to apply to the studios. I just went to school, and then luckily I was able to get a job. But Chris was literally his mom and dad were also supportive of his work. Mm-hmm. So they took him to a lot of functions we could meet industry.
Mm-hmm.
They're super important to just make a general connection. Yeah. And then another thing is that, when you're working at the Hanna-Barbera store, I'm sure you weren't thinking this store is going to lead me directly into animation, but you were able to apply yourself at that store to show that you could do the work. Sure enough, someone who comes by the studio comes by and say, oh, he can do the work. And that's another way to get a job. You just apply yourself, do the work. And now we just do most of that digitally. Reach out to people who work in the industry, get those connections. And, just don't be a pest and don't be an asshole, and you'll probably be okay if you can do the work.
Yeah, you can get general advice. I've even had some people say, well, do you have any advice for me? And I look at their stuff, I'm like, no, I don't have any advice. You're good. You're good. Just keep posting the stuff. Yeah.
And just like you said earlier, it's also timing. You got in right at the start of the boom.
Speaking of timing.
Right before the recession. But then I have you graduated during the recession, so that was a sucky point to get in. And I know a ton of people like that. Yeah, timing is everything.
Yeah. Sure. And if I had the internet when I was in high school and DVDs, at least I had VHS, and that was kind of cool. But man, there's so much more stuff that people can use to learn. And of course, as somebody who didn't go to school, I keep thinking, wow, there must be so much people can learn without even going to school.
Yeah.
Totally.
For sure.
It's possible. It's even easier now.
I was at the animation workshop there. They have guest teachers where they come in and they have rotating disciplines will come in, because I was teaching third year students, and they would have it would mimic a whole CG animation pipeline where they would do a short film. And so they would have in the very beginning, it was myself and a story artist. We would come in and they would help them kind of plan it all out. I would talk to them about doing designs and things like that. And we were there for 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks there would be other artists would come in who were people do rigging or texturing or lighting and things like that. So yeah, that was
cool.
Yeah. But for somebody who never went to school, it was kind of weird trying to teach, because I'm I don't know if I ever sat down and thought of these things. I just kind of learned by doing. And
That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, your story is definitely very unique, which is what I really like about this podcast, because everybody has a different path they take to get where they are. But, you know, everybody we talk to is successful and they're an industry professional. So one thing that we really do learn from this podcast is, you know, many are the paths that lead us home to like the actual, to wherever you want to be. There's no concrete route to get there, you know, and you didn't go to college like a lot of people might have, you know, but you still ended up a very successful character designer working with these incredibly talented artists in one of the most prominent time in animation history, you know? So like regardless of where you are and, you know, what you're doing in your life, you have the potential to, you know, if you put the work and effort in, you have the potential to.
I always say I owe my success to hard work and dumb luck.
Yeah. I was thinking it was like talent, networking, and timing, you know, like those are the three. TNT. I just made that up. TNT. Yeah.
I think we got a new word. That's a good one.
Yeah. TNT. Yeah.
You could only dream that you could be one of those things. And when you actually find somebody who says, yeah, I watched that as a kid and now I'm drawing it professionally or something, I'm like, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't think about that. You're just living your dream. But, you know, we all grew up with either comic books or movies or cartoons. There's something that was from like, you know, 50 years ago that we just love. And like, you could only hope that anything you did would matter that much. And that's
sure.
bonus.
Chris, out of curiosity, do you have any shows you're watching now that you like, animated shows that you really like that you think might last the test of time?
You know, it's really sad because I'm just so busy usually working or with family or just like binging all these TV shows that I don't get any time to watch shows. I have a huge list as long as my arm of all the new shows that I want to watch. But it's cool that I have been able to, lately I've been enjoying getting my daughter into The Legend of Korra. And she's a total on that. And so I'm like, oh, hey, Avatar just started on Netflix now. And that was one that I was too busy to watch. So I'm like, once we finish Korra, we're going to watch Avatar.
Oh, you will not be disappointed. One of the best shows ever.
Yeah. I will hold that over her head.
Oh, shit. All right. Well, I feel like we're wrapping up here. Like, I feel like we touched on a lot of really cool stuff. We learned about from your very beginning first animation experience watching Snow White, being scared a little bit by Snow White, Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes, being encouraged by your parents, working at my favorite thing about your story was working at the Hanna-Barbera store, because I vaguely have that recollection of that existing very briefly in my head as a very small child. And then that leading into your big break in animation, which I think was really like a really fun part of the story. And then of course, just the snowball effect working with Gendy and Craig and Paul Ruddish, which is pretty amazing as well. Three people who I've admired since I was a teenager, which is fantastic. So really, really impressive, really fun story. Super inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of people out there. Chris, do you have anything else to add for the people that are watching, the youngins that are listening?
No, I mean, it may sound cliche, but I just say keep drawing because you know, it's going to take a lot of work to get to that place you want to be working in animation. And you know, you just have to keep building up your skills and working hard. And don't freak out that your stuff isn't perfect now. It might be perfect 6 months from now or 2 years from now. But just keep trying to keep absorbing as much as you can. Go online, check out your favorite artist's work, and you know, work off of that. Don't be afraid of fan art. Don't be afraid of mimicking your favorite artist, because you know, if you want to, you know, what if you got to work for Bruce Timm because you draw like Bruce Timm, you know, or something, you know? That's
for sure. Yeah.
I think there should be no rules. Just keep working, you know, keep your passion and keep working at it and try to get in there. For sure.
And one of my favorite things that I kind of learned during this interview, which I want to reiterate before we sign off, is like, I think it'll be helpful to look into what your favorite artist, what inspires them and what they are learning from. Like when you were talking about Gendy looking at the little golden books and all those other artists you mentioned. That's something that I really didn't think of too much, and I think that'll be helpful for any up and coming artist. Look what inspires the people that you're inspired by, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, we never wrapped out a digital podcast before, so I don't exactly know how to end this. So I guess we can just say thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope. Yes, if Sabrina was here, she would say please like and subscribe. Follow Chris on Instagram on all the platforms. Chris, can you mention your handle one more time?
I'm Chris Battle Art.
Chris Battle Art.
So if you Google me, there's not a lot of other Chris Battles out there, and you can find me real easy.
Nice. Yes. Follow Chris. Check out all his stuff. Get inspired by him. And yeah, we really appreciate everybody listening, everybody watching. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit. Hopefully you guys were inspired a little bit. And thanks again for checking out the ass. Thanks for sharing your ass with us, Chris. We really appreciate that. And I guess we'll see everybody next time here in the ass, is what I say. Regrettably, that's what I say every time.
Yep.